Released on the cusp of Korea's democratic reform in 1988, Chilsu and Mansu, the debut film from director Park Kwang-su, serves as a striking example of new Korean realism. Because the political censorship laws imposed by previous authoritarian governments had been relaxed, filmmakers during this period were finally able to address and interpret the harsh realities of Korean working-class experience, leading to a wave of films with working-class protagonists, dealing with working-class themes. In Chilsu and Mansu, those protagonists are two painters on the cusp of Korean society, cut off from their families and shunned due to their low economic status. One of the main themes running throughout Chilsu and Mansu is the impossibility of communication between upper and lower classes, peeking through even during comedic moments.
Mom, 뭔지 안 들려, 자식아. 안 들려.
The political implications of this metaphor reach a boiling point in the film's final sequence. And a word of warning now, there will be spoilers ahead. The final sequence shows Chilsu and Mansu yelling out their grievances against society from the top of a towering billboard in Seoul's Gangnam district. Spectators quickly gather below to watch this spectacle, but are unable to hear their screams from down below. Their action is an act of catharsis, with Mansu pointing out the inherent injustices in Korean society.
야, 그러고 어떻게 사냐? 그리고 절에 가면 용서해 주냐? 그러고 살면 천당 가냐 이 자식들아! 여기서 다 보고 있다!
Their action is quickly misinterpreted as an action of violent terrorism or of suicidal protest. The building is soon surrounded by police, paramedics, and news crew. Police officers plead for them to descend, but despite all this, Chilsu and Mansu choose to stay on the billboard, their voices still inaudible to those below.
지금 뭐라고 하는 거야?
글쎄요, 좀 흥분된 것 같습니다.
저기 떨어진 거 아니야? 우리 그냥 놔주세요. 우리가 무슨 문제를 일으켰다고 이 난리예요.
In a mid-sequence montage, director Park Kwang-su decides to cross-cut between many different types of shots. There are extremely long aerial shots resembling news footage, long shots of the billboard showing Chilsu and Mansu as minuscule figures, and medium shots showing the street-level commotion. Interspersed are close-up shots of Chilsu and Mansu, their shouts muted by the dramatic soundtrack. Taken as a whole, the cinematography and sound design here work to further isolate Chilsu and Mansu from onlookers below, expressing the growing tension and perhaps the futility of the situation. The event lasts into the night, during which Mansu's dilapidated apartment is searched by police, who discover the details of his family background. The police use this information as leverage to try to persuade Mansu to descend, stating that they will help the duo start their lives anew.
좋습니다, 박만수 씨. 당신에 대해서 모든 걸 다 알고 있습니다. 그러나 아버님은 아버님이고 당신은 당신인 겁니다. 당신 아버님이 과거에 아무리 이 사회에 무리를 끼쳤던 분이라 해도 이제인 당신까지 이 복지 사회에서 암적인 존재가 되셔야 되겠습니까? 세상을 다시 한번 시작해 봅시다. 제가 도와드리겠습니다.
It seems that these vapid promises were only made to distract the duo, as in the film's final moments, police operatives scale up the billboard, forcibly grabbing Chilsu. Mansu begins descending the billboard's ladder on his own accord, but in a pivotal moment, he decides to leap. The moment is caught in a freeze frame. It seems that director Park Kwang-su deliberately left this finale open-ended, with Mansu leaving in an ambulance, his fate uncertain. Meanwhile, Chilsu is escorted into the back of a police vehicle, possibly awaiting trial for his perceived crimes. The audience is left to interpret the events as the film focuses on a final freeze frame of Chilsu's anguished face. I interpret this final sequence as an explicit reiteration of the theme I mentioned before, the impossibility of communication between upper and lower classes. In a very literal way, the lower class Chilsu and Mansu's criticisms against society are unheard by the upper class people below. Chilsu and Mansu have no political motive with their shouting. They simply want to let off some steam. But as film theorist Isolde Standish states, this scene becomes the ultimate representation of non-communication, as the people of Seoul misinterpret their antics as a suicide attempt. Standish also notes the paradox inherent in Chilsu and Mansu's literally elevated positions. They are members of the lowest social level, working as painters high above society. This reinforces the impossibility of communication theme yet again, as people shout to them from the ground. But the scene carries a metaphorical meaning too. For example, why doesn't the duo just descend from the billboard early on? Film theorist Darcy Paquet explains. For the two dispossessed workers on the billboard, the policemen and military personnel assembled below come to represent the bias and authoritarianism of the government and Korean society in general. To simply climb down and submit to the authorities below would be a severe capitulation and loss of self-respect. They also likely suspect that as soon as they do descend, they will be arrested. Thus, through a societal lens, the ending scene also demonstrates in Paquet's words how deep levels of mistrust between the government and the working class, built up over years of tension and conflict, make communication between the two sides almost impossible. Moving beyond the theme of non-communication, the ending scene in Chilsu and Mansu is also exemplary of how a national cinema can address its audience as an imagined community. For example, in this scene, director Park Kwang-su positions us, the viewers, as literal spectators, watching the events unfold on the TV news. In fact, the events of the final sequence are foreshadowed much earlier in the film, in a scene where Mansu is idly watching a similar story on the news.
오늘 오후 3시 반쯤 서울 동부 이촌동 왕궁 아파트에서 전남 광양군 광영리에 사는 35살 최정일 씨가 50m 높이 굴뚝에 올라가 가출한 아내를 찾아달라며 2시간 동안 소동을 벌이다가 경찰의 설득으로 자진해서 굴뚝을 내려왔습니다.
This technique, as well as techniques like the aerial shot I mentioned earlier, emphasize the voyeuristic relationship between us as viewers and Chilsu and Mansu as spectacle. Another technique, the technique of freeze frame, is especially effective in pulling the audience out of the film's diegesis. Park Kwang-su's use of this metatextual technique puts emphasis on the voyeuristic relationship between viewer and spectacle furthermore, and forces the viewer to think more critically about the events they've just witnessed. The resulting effect is purposeful and direct, and follows in the ethos of other new Korean realist films in forcing the audience to address and interpret the harsh realities of the Korean working class experience. With Chilsu and Mansu, director Park Kwang-su crafted a true work of national cinema, one that was able to directly address to its audience the theme of the impossibility of communication between upper and lower classes, and explicitly addressing issues that pertain to the working class. It's one of my favorite Korean films and one of the masterpieces of new Korean cinema. If you haven't watched it yet, go do yourself a favor, check it out. And with that, I'd like to thank you for watching my analysis of Chilsu and Mansu. See you next time.